All right, now we move on to social psychology. And social psychology is often compared to sociology, but they are focused on two different aspects of social behavior. Sociologists are interested in the group and how the group can be categorized and differences between groups. So they're interested in the collective. Social psychologists are interested in the individual and how the collective influences the individual. So social psychologists are going to examine how behavior influences or is influenced by the social environment and how personality moderates that effect. So there's two ways of looking at social psychology. One is how the social situation where I find myself with respect to other people influences me, and the other is how my own personality influences my behavior regardless of the social situation, or how those two things interact. So we'll look at situation and disposition throughout this chapter. Now, fundamental attribution error simply means making a mistake explaining something as though situational factors are responsible or dispositional factors are responsible. And we'll see in a little bit, we tend to do that in a self-serving way. And so if I do something good, then it's my disposition. I'm skilled, I'm intelligent, I'm a good problem solver. If I do something bad, well, it's situational elements. So there's a self-serving attribution that often happens, but fundamental attribution error is just making the mistake of emphasizing one or the other when we don't really have all the information. So in individualistic cultures like our own, like in the United States, there is a greater likelihood of positing, let me make sure I get this right. So it says, individualistic culture, people such as myself, have a greater tendency to commit fundamental attribution errors. So attribute to a person situational factors if they make a mistake, or if they do something well, and attribute to a person dispositional factors if they do something bad. But that error tends to disappear in collectivist cultures, where there's a greater appreciation for recognizing similarities between people and not trying to, compete against them. So actor-observer bias is simply when we make this fundamental attribution error with people we don't know very well. So if you hear of just some random person who got in a car accident, you might just assume they're a bad driver. Whereas if it's someone you know really well and you know that they're a good driver, you know more about them, you're less likely to just attribute it to their disposition and might say, you know what, it's probably bad driving conditions, maybe bad weather, another driver who did something stupid. Here's the self-serving bias. We're more likely to give a dispositional explanation for our own experiences if it benefits us, and we're less likely to do that if it does not benefit us. So if I get an A on a test, it's because I studied hard and I'm smart. If I get a D on a test, it's because the professor made a mistake, made a bad test, is out to get me. And I might have the exact opposite explanations if I hear about you doing well or poorly on a test. There is the just world hypothesis, which I believe came up, nope, this was in a different class, excuse me. Just world hypothesis is the belief that good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people, and it's a way of sort of hiding the fact that oftentimes bad things can happen to good people, or you can make the right choice and have a bad outcome. Sometimes there is no reason for it, but we tend to want to think, if you have a just world hypothesis, you want to believe that the world and the consequences that follow actions, the world is just. And so from a just world hypothesis, if someone can't get a job, it's because they didn't try hard enough, not factors outside of their control. So again, there's the fundamental attribution error at play in the just world hypothesis. We've talked about personality. And in social psychology, we look at the relationship between personality and then social milieu or social contexts. And part of that shows that our personality will fit into some social roles well and other social roles poorly. And we usually have a role to play. In order to be in a group, we have to play the role of a group member, whether that be leader or follower or someone hanging around on the margins, kind of rejecting the group. There's always some relationship with respect to the group. And so we can understand our situation, our social situation, in terms of the role that we're playing. So for example, in a classroom, I'm often the teacher or the instructor, the facilitator. Sometimes I'm the student, and perhaps you are the teacher or the facilitator or the student or the listener or the observer. There are a lot of different roles that you can play. In any group, in any culture, there's expectations for behavior. Do you look directly at someone when you talk to them? Do you bow? Do you shake their hands? Do you speak loudly or softly? Can you make jokes? So there's expectations or norms that we follow. And there's also social scripts, and the scripts are baked into the culture. What do you say when you see someone on an elevator? There are appropriate comments and inappropriate comments depending on where you're at in the world. In some elevators, I imagine there's no interaction. There's only polite bowing. It could be appropriate to tell a joke or just ignore them or stare at them. The social context is going to dictate what the script is in a given situation. All right, now we have one of those experiments. Oh, I didn't say this. Social psychology really got its start in the middle of the 20th century after World War II. So there were a lot of atrocities that occurred during that war, in particular the collection and mass genocide of the Jewish people and other minorities. And there was a lot of confusion as to how human beings could treat other human beings that way. And so there were a lot of hypotheses about the social factors that were involved in allowing something like that to happen. And one of those hypotheses was that wearing a uniform allowed a person to hide their identity, their personality, and adopt characteristics of the uniform. So a Nazi SS officer wearing an SS uniform allows them to hide certain aspects of themselves and manifest behaviors that they may not ordinarily do. So Philip Zimbardo took normal college students at Stanford, and he actually rated them in terms of their personality. He picked like middle of the road, average people. He gave half of them officers' uniforms, and the other half he gave them prisoners' uniforms. And he just said, like, the prisoners are in these cells, and then the officers are just there to make sure they stay in the cells and they get fed. And after, it was supposed to go on for a month, I think, but it barely lasted a week. I don't remember all the details. You can look this up online. Philip Zimbardo, Stanford Prison Experiment, PDF, and you'll find the whole article. They had to shut it down early because the prisoners were treated so horribly by the officers. Even though they were normal people, they're classmates. There's horrible torture going on. And the only explanation was people were given uniforms, and so their behavior started to follow what they expected of their social role. I wouldn't think attitude would be a topic in social psychology, so let's see what's going on here. An attitude is our evaluation of a person, idea, or object, so I guess our attitude towards something. It can be positive or negative, and influenced by forces, external forces, and internal factors. So this kind of sounds like when you have an impression of somebody, so you're getting to know them or you interact with them for the first time, so there's an affective component, you feel a particular way about it, you do something, and you think something, or you have a belief. So all of those influence how you feel about a person or an experience. In cognitive dissonance, we have contradiction between two of those things, the thinking and the behaving. Leon Festinger and Lewis Carl Smith recognized that when our behavior and our thoughts or beliefs, our values are in contradiction, which means they run opposed to each other. We need to resolve that somehow. So for example, I might think it's important to save 20% of my income. And I know that is a good number, and I know it's important, and I know it's the right thing to do, but I spend like 95% of my income, hypothetically. My value is that 20% needs to be saved. My behavior is that only 5% is saved. In that situation, I'm not living up to my own values, so I either need to change my values or change my behavior. So that dissonance, Festinger and Carl Smith called cognitive dissonance. So later research found, and this is possibly new to me, only conflicting cognitions that threaten positive self-image cause dissonance. So I guess that means if I don't really care about my value system, it probably wouldn't be my value system. But if it threatens my positive self-image, so I can't think of an example of something that doesn't threaten my positive self-image that's also a value. So I'll have to think about that. Maybe you can come up with an example on your own. And that dissonance can cause physiological arousal and activate brain regions involved in emotions and cognitive functioning. So dissonance can be difficult to live with, I guess. It can have physiological effects on you. It's not just a thought. It's something that manifests in your body. So there's some examples. The one that's usually used is the idea that smoking is bad for you. So if you smoke and you know smoking is bad for you, then you have dissonance between your belief, your understanding, your knowledge, and your actual behavior. Therefore, you need to either change your belief that smoking is bad for you, it's okay for me, or change your behavior. All right, the effect of initiation. So initiation is commonly seen as as joining a group. So you're an outsider, you want to join the group, and in order to join the group, there's like a rite of passage or initiation that needs to take place for you to really be accepted. And so the effect of initiation, let's see, Greek life, sororities, fraternities often have some sort of initiation you have to pass through in order to be admitted to the group. And that's not just hazing. It's not just being critical. There's actually a stronger effect of the group if the initiation is hard. So if you can just join any group for any reason, then that group you join won't be one you really identify with that strong. There won't be a strong bond. But if it's very hard to join a group and there's a difficult period to get through in order to become initiated into that group, then you'll have a much stronger in-group cohesion. So that says relative magnitude of liking a group. You'll like it more the harder the initiation is. So it's not a random reason why you're doing it. There's a purpose behind it, in effect. All right, so persuasion is the ability to be influenced by another person's values, beliefs, opinions. Of course, you know that if you've taken public speaking or written a persuasive paper, your perspective is likely influenced by other people who have persuaded you to think a specific way. So persuasion can be described two ways. One is the central route. The other is the peripheral route. So a central route is, let me tell you why you should think in a particular way. Here's what you should think and here's why. A peripheral route might convince you indirectly. So, for example, I could explain to you why smoking is wrong and how it has links to cardiac disease and cancers. Or I can just introduce you to someone who was a lifetime smoker, who has lung disease, or has had 3 heart attacks, and like a bunch of examples of the consequences of smoking. I'm never telling you what you should believe. I'm just kind of showing you a bunch of examples. So we can be kind of clever and indirect, go the peripheral route, or just be explicit and come out and say it. And so here are the steps of both of those processes. So when we get to persuasion, this is especially important in marketing and sales, there are a whole bunch of techniques that can influence persuasion. One of those, and you wouldn't expect that these work, but they do. Evidence shows that they do work. One is called the foot in the door technique. And this is, so literally, like in sales in the past, this happened when I was a kid. People would go door to door, and all that they just needed to get a little bit of the way in. If they could get a little bit of the way in, they could keep pushing and keep pushing. So they just want to like shove their foot in the door and prop it open so that they can fit more through. And the foot in the door technique works like this. You give someone, or you ask for something small. Can I have 5 minutes of your time? Can I have 1 minute of your time? And once you give them that, it's easier to ask for, can I have $5? But if you just came up and asked for $5 without getting your foot in the door, asking for something smaller, you're less likely to succeed with your bigger ask if it wasn't preceded by a smaller ask. So beware of someone asking for something that's reasonable and small, because that opens the door for them to ask for something greater, and you're more likely to give them that. All right, shifting gears a little bit. This study by Solomon Asch shows how our social group can influence the way we think and feel, even though it's not direct. So this, I suppose it would be an indirect form, going back to the previous slide. But here's what happened. In a classroom, there were like 8 people, but unbeknownst to the participant, 7 of those people belonged to the experiment. So there's only 1 participant in this big group. Excuse me. And the group members were asked to compare line X with A, B, or C. So line X is identical in length to either A, B, or C. And just looking at this, it's clear to me that X is identical to C. And you can probably see the same thing. But in a group, if you're sitting in seat 6, sorry for all those S's, and seat 1 says X is identical to B, and then seat 2 says X is identical to B, and they go down the line and everyone says B, you have your perception of which is the identical line and everyone else's. And what they found was the majority of time, not all the time, but the majority of times, the participant followed the group. They conformed their answer to the group's answer. And you can watch videos of this experiment and other ones like it, where the participant's like looking at the line going, huh? What are they seeing? And a lot of them adjust their own perception. Now, in retrospect, they were interviewed later. Some of them said, yeah, I knew what the answer was, but I wasn't going to be the odd man out, so I just kind of went along with them, even though I didn't think any differently. But some people actually thought that they were mistaken in their perception and then corrected it by following everybody else. So there's a bunch of applications for what that means. Conforming to public expectation. Another famous or infamous study in social psychology was done by Stanley Milgram, and that was the example I gave earlier about Nazi officers doing horrible things because they were ordered to. So Milgram hypothesized that people would do horrible things that they would never do on their own if they were asked to by an authority figure. So, for example, everyone who participated in this experiment would say, I would never kill someone if I was asked to. But then they were put in a situation where they were asked to, and 2 out of 3 went so far as to kill someone. Now, they didn't actually kill them. There was the clever way this experiment was set up, but they were asked to electrocute somebody by pushing a button. And they couldn't see what was happening. Nothing was actually happening, but they could hear someone being electrocuted. Anyway, 2 out of 3 went all the way to the XXX, 435 to 450 volts, which was considered lethal. And so some people said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm out of here, which is pretty impressive. There's more details to that experiment, but you can read it if you want. Groupthink is a negative problem, or it's a problem with working in a group. So groupthink is the phenomenon where if you, let's say you were deciding to build a bridge, and you were hired to build a bridge over this river, and you were just working on your own. You think that if you had like 10 people to work with you, then the 10 of you can put your minds together and come up with something that none of you could on your own, but that would be better. But with groupthink, you actually start to take the decision further than anyone would go on their own. So it might be something more extreme, like if you were designing, or let's just go back to the bridge. You wind up with this giant bridge with like 15 lanes on it, even though it's completely absurd. But someone says like, yeah, but if we just have 2 lanes, that's too, or 1 lane is too narrow. You have to wait for the other person to come across, and there would be all this hassle. We need 2 lanes. And then they're like, all right, yeah, 2 lanes. And 2 lanes might be reasonable, but then someone's like, yeah, but what about a 3rd lane just in case someone breaks down? It doesn't get all backed up. Okay, yeah, 3 lanes. Well, if you can do 3 lanes, don't you need a separate lane, a spare lane on both sides? What if you need construction? Pretty soon you've got like 15 lanes, and that would never happen. This polarizing effect. That would never happen if you just had one person. So to avoid groupthink, you need someone to play devil's advocate, which is to take a position contrary to the rest of the group, and that just keeps the groupthink in check. Social loafing is the phenomenon of letting someone else do your work in a group. So if you had to solve 15 problems on your own, you would just start solving the problems. If you were in a group of 3, you might find that, well, group members 1 and 2 aren't going to want to turn in an incomplete assignment, so they're going to do it. I'm just not going to do anything. I'm going to do less work than I would have on my own. Therefore, the group actually means that people can do significantly less work, and then some people are doing more work. And so that tends to be the case, looks like, on easy tasks, but perhaps on larger tasks or more complicated tasks, people may feel compelled to be more involved. Social psychologists study prejudice and discrimination. A prejudice is a prejudgment, an expectation about a people group based on ethnicity, skin color, religion, even gender, any sort of group characteristic, and just assuming that you know how they're going to act or what they're going to be like. So stereotypes are often involved with prejudice, and discrimination is making decisions about them based on that go against that group of people. So racial discrimination has been well documented in the United States and continues to be. So there we have prejudice, stereotype, and discrimination definitions. Racism, ageism, homophobia, sexism. All right, we mentioned self-fulfilling prophecy in a previous chapter with self-efficacy. So the self-fulfilling prophecy, once again, is when we have an expectation about what we'll do, we're more likely to fulfill that expectation. So if I think I'm going to do well on a speech, I'll probably do well. If I think I'm going to flub it up, I'll probably flub it up. Confirmation bias is what happens when we look for evidence of what we believe. So if I believe that Christians are good people, I'm going to ignore whenever I see a Christian do something mean or bad or dishonorable or disrespectful. But I'll pay extra special attention and remember it if I see a Christian do something good. So we confirm our stereotypes. And that's usually how racist and sexist ideology and discrimination continues or persists. We look for evidence that confirms our belief and discount evidence that disconfirms our belief. In a really simple way, we can understand social psychology by recognizing the influence of in-groups and out-groups. So an in-group is a group we belong to, and we identify with. So we're more likely to appreciate and learn about and be patient with people that are part of our group, and we tend to simplify and judge in, again, like a really simple, unnuanced way, people in another group or in an out group. So we think that people in an out group are homogenous and they're all the same. So we can speak generally about people who've gone to college or people who haven't gone to college. If you've gone to college, you know that everyone at college with a college degree is going to be quite a bit different. There's no one college graduate. But as a college graduate, you might look at non-college graduates and think, oh, well, they're all the same. But then, so that's in-group versus out-group. But the reverse will be true. If you're a non-college graduate, you'll recognize that non-college graduates have this large spectrum. They're all over the place. And then college graduates, well, yeah, they've all gone to college. They're all the same. So that's the in-group, out-group bias. Let's see. Aggression, you'd think would be in the chapter on emotion, but here it is in social psychology, because aggression is directed at a person. So it can be with the purposes of injuring someone, so hostile aggression, or to get something, instrumental aggression. There's something you're after, and so you're aggressive in order to get something. Frustration aggression theory is when humans are prevented from achieving an important goal, they become frustrated and aggressive. Definitely a terrible twos sort of deal. Toddlerhood, psychosocial goal formation. Industry versus inferiority. That's a little bit later than terrible twos. That's the fourth stage, I believe. But you're hearing that frustration aggression theory in that example. So just linking some of those chapters together. Why are we aggressive? Well, evolutionary theory suggests that it serves a function, that maybe protect a mate, perpetuate genes. So perhaps it's not all bad. We are aggressive for a reason. And if we weren't, then perhaps we'd be weaker or less able to protect our people. But what about bullying? Bullying has been studied a lot more recently, specifically cyberbullying and how bullying affects a person as they grow up. So boys tend to engage in direct aggression as bullying. Girls have social forms of aggression, so like spreading rumors or socially isolating people. So long-term effects have to do with decreased mental health and poor academic work. And then, there's some information at the bottom about cyberbullying. So more common in girls, affects girls more. And we see that in research on Instagram and other social media forms. Just getting a sense of how many more of these we got. Uh-oh. Excuse me. I'm looking for this one. Sorry about that. So I was on Kitty Genovese. All right, the bystander effect. So what happened there was a woman was beaten and raped in an alleyway in New York City, I believe, and a lot of people heard it. In fact, 9 people reported hearing the screams, but nobody called the police. They all assumed someone else would call the police. No one did. So this is a bystander effect. If other people are around who could solve a problem, you just assume that they will, and you don't take responsibility. So it's also called diffusion of responsibility. Even though if you were on your own and you saw something happen, you would do something about it. If other people are around, that responsibility that would fall on you gets spread out across everyone around, and everyone feels less of a pull to be responsible. Social psychologists also study pro-social behavior, which is just doing good things, and altruism, being a good person. Empathy is the ability to feel with another person, so feel what they're feeling, see something from their perspective. And so altruism is a form of selfless helping, and this all kind of fits into the motivation to help. Help can also be offered in a selfish way. Like you're doing something so that they'll maybe reciprocate. So just because someone does something nice doesn't necessarily mean they're doing so for altruistic reasons. And so some social psychologists study these phenomena. Why do we build relationships? You might think that you're friends with people because you have so much in common. But actually, the single greatest factor on why you develop relationships is proximity. You simply spend more time around them based on where you live and what your job is, for example, or where you go to school. So it's not so much you get together with people that are like you. You're more likely to get together with someone if you just find yourself in the same proximity. But once you're in the same proximity, you can predict who will get together based on similarities. So in building relationships, it's the give and take reciprocity and sharing more about yourself and building that intimacy. Some social psychologists study what features are attractive, so how you become attracted to one person or another. Sternberg has a theory of love, which includes 3 poles: intimacy, getting to know someone on a deep personal level; passion, the physical attractiveness; and then the chosen commitment, the decision that's made. So those 3 things all connect together for love. If you have just the physical attraction and commitment, then you have this fatuous love. If you have intimacy and commitment, then there's companionate love without the romance. And so we can understand that having 2 out of 3 or 1 out of 3 changes the quality of the love. We can understand them through those 3 poles. Oh, and consummate love is the 3 together. The behaviorists, I suspect, have this theory of social exchange, where I build relationships and get along with you if it gets something back to me. So I'm good for you if you can be good for me. If you have nothing to give me, I'm less likely to be nice to you. And so it's this social exchange, like we're exchanging money and we're making these transactions. Kind of a sad note to end on, but very much something that's studied, almost the economics of relationships.